What if I told you that not even us readers are free from the world government's propaganda? Guys, what I'm about to tell you may shock you, but it's by far the most likely explanation as to why the Iron Giant suddenly decided to rampage on Mariejoe. Stick with me till the end, because this is going to change the way you see One Piece. It's all gonna make sense in a few minutes. But before we begin, let me tell you something interesting from the Matrix trilogy. Remember how much Neo was hyped up to be the One, but then the Matrix Reloaded came in and the architect reveals that yes, Neo may be the One, but he is not the only one. The One is actually a reoccurring theme within the Matrix's programming. How is this relevant to One Piece? It's relevant because the world of One Piece is eerily similar to the Matrix. Most of the populace has no clue about the Void Century. Even most pirates don't know anything beyond the vague idea of the legendary treasure of the One Piece. Yes, there are groups like the Buccaneers or the Giants of Elbaf who have been anticipating Joyboy's arrival, but their knowledge is limited too. Which makes sense considering how deep and thorough the world government's propaganda goes. But then again, it's impossible to have such a perfectly dystopian and perfectly authoritarian global society. Inherited will, the destiny of the age, and the dreams of the people. As long as people continue to pursue the meaning of freedom, these things will never cease to be. It doesn't matter the era. There are always going to be revolutionaries, explorers, and rebels who don't let themselves be enslaved by the elites that enslave the world. I'd say, at the very least, there have been 3 Joyboys throughout history, if not more. There was a Joyboy 200 years ago, whose actions resulted in the world government's recognition of the Ryukyu Kingdom. Although, this Joyboy also failed to make any notable, everlasting differences. He failed, and his existence was subsequently erased from history. We're gonna answer what happened to Joyboy's ancient kingdom in the second half of this video. For now, let's try to understand what may have happened 200 years ago, and how there was definitely another Joyboy whom we don't know about yet. Starting with the Iron Giant, what we know is that it was originally created 900 years ago. We have no idea what it did during the Void Century and what must have happened to it after the Void Century, but what we do know is that it suddenly appeared and tried to attack Mariejoe. The world government then asked a group of scientists to completely destroy the Iron Giant, but they couldn't help their curiosity and decided to study the ancient piece of technology in secret. Time continued to pass, and the Iron Giant ultimately ended up in Vegapunk's possession. Now, the question is, why did the Iron Giant suddenly decide to act 200 years ago? Short answer, yes, there was a Joyboy who fought for fishermen rights 200 years ago. Long answer, when Robin heard Vegapunk mention that this Iron Giant attacked Mariejoe 200 years ago, she pointed out that this is when the fishermen rights movement began to take ground. Hachi also mentioned the same thing back in Fishman Island. He said that until 200 years ago, fishmen and mermaids were categorized as fish people rather than people. Naturally, it's not a coincidence that the Iron Giant attacked Mariejoe around the same time as when fishmen got basic rights. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't the Gorosei mention that the Nika fruit hasn't awakened in 800 years? Actually, not quite. What the Gorosei said in chapter 1044 is that the government has failed to get the fruit even after 800 years of trying, which is not the same as outright saying that the fruit itself hasn't awakened for 800 years. I mean, if we reference the last panel of chapter 1037, Mercury talks about how the fruit hasn't awakened for centuries. So it's not that the Nika fruit hasn't awakened until for the past 800 years, it's actually just that the government has failed to get their hands on it for the past 800 years. But then again, Mercury said that the fruit hasn't awakened in centuries. He didn't say that it hasn't awakened in 200 years. However, let me bring your attention to something Law said in Punk Hazard. In the same panel where Law explains that the world government has been researching gigantism for centuries, we see a giant rampaging in the background. Coincidentally, when Vegapunk tells about how the Iron Giant ran out of power before it could cause any casualties, we see a surprisingly similar background panel. It features the Iron Giant rampaging in Mariejoe. When you put Law's panel and Vegapunk's panel next to each other, it becomes impossible to ignore. Both panels are hinting at the same incident that happened 200 years ago. We can conclude that the world government started researching gigantism in humans after the Iron Giant incident, and we also know that Law said they have been researching it for centuries. In this case, centuries mean 200 years. Which means that when Mercury said that the fruit hasn't awakened for centuries, it could also mean it hasn't awakened in 200 years. Yes, it's technically the truth. I mean, 200 years is still a couple of centuries, but considering the context of the Void Century and everything, you'd think that the term centuries may be hinting at something that happened or started happening way before 200 years ago. The next argument against it would be about how the world government managed to completely erase or hide the existence of the Joyboy who challenged them 200 years ago. We have to understand that the world government is the ultimate authoritarian regime. They were able to mostly wipe out any knowledge about Rox D. Zebek, even though it has only been a few decades. So it's not unreasonable to think that they could have done the same thing to the previous Joyboy, especially if the previous Joyboy didn't know the true meaning of his fruit. Yes! We're getting there! We're about to solve the mystery! The thing about Luffy is that he has just recently fulfilled a prophecy by liberating Wano, and he still doesn't know that he is Joyboy. He still doesn't know that he ate the Nika fruit. What if the Joyboy from 200 years ago was the same in the sense that he led a civil rights movement without even knowing that he himself was Joyboy? Heck, what if he was a fishman? We already have Jaguar D. Sol. How about Reef D. Tideseeker? If a giant can be a D, why not a fishman? Now, if he didn't know he was Joyboy, but he still awakened the Devil Fruit, then that means that he also initiated the Drums of Liberation. This caused the Iron Giant to awaken, and then he attacked Mariejoe. Why? Why did it just wake up and attack Mariejoe? And why did it stop? It's because the Iron Giant was on Fishman Island. Along with Poseidon, Noah, and a road poneglyph, the Fishman Island was also keeping the Iron Giant away from the world government. The Joyboy led a civil rights movement, awakened the fruit, and the Drums of Liberation caused the giant to awaken. And since Mariejoe was right above the Fishman Island, it was logically reasonable for the giant to just pull up and invoke fear. But if the Drums of Liberation caused the giant to awaken, why didn't Zunisha show up 200 years ago? And why did the Iron Giant not show up to Wano when Luffy awakened? It's actually very simple. Both Zunisha and the Iron Giant were given different roles. Zunisha's role was to help in opening Wano. As for the Iron Giant, well, it must have had something to do with the Fishman, because as we just speculated, the Iron Giant was hidden on Fishman Island. This is why the Iron Giant appeared in Mariejoe, and Zunisha pulled up to Wano. But as you must have noticed already, they both left without getting anything done. Zunisha didn't help in opening Wano, and the Iron Giant didn't do whatever he was supposed to do. But wait, didn't the previous Joyboy succeed? After all, fishmen were given civil rights, and they were also admitted to the world government. Well, just like how Momonosuke decided to not open Wano even after it was liberated, the previous Joyboy must have decided to stop because of some other reason. The way I see it, the previous Joyboy must have been given an ultimatum. He must have had to make a compromise. He must have been in a situation where his death led to the recognition of the Ryukyu Kingdom. Of course, he died with a smile on his face because he knew that his will shall be inherited by someone else. As for the Iron Giant, his unexpected interference must have been what made the situation worse than what it was. Joyboy died before the Iron Giant could do anything, and the Iron Giant shuts down. He was unconscious for the past 200 years, and only awakened in the present thanks to Luffy. However, he has been sulking because not only did he fail to do what the OG Joyboy told him to, he also failed the Joyboy from 200 years ago. That's why he apologizes to Joyboy in chapter 1111. Alright, now that we know what may have happened 200 years ago, let's solve what happened to the OG Joyboy. Was he betrayed? Is he the one who punished Zunisha? What was his promise to the Mermaid Princess? We only know a handful of things about Joyboy. Zunisha and the Iron Giant were his comrades. There was a promise between him and the fishmen that was broken for reasons we don't know. All we know is that he tried to raise Noah to the surface of the sea with Poseidon's help. Finally, the last and most important thing about Joyboy is that he was the one who left the legendary treasure of One Piece on the island, which is later named Laugh-Tale by Gold D. Roger. These are the facts we know about him, but there are a few more things that are very likely to be true. For example, Joyboy must have been a giant. He must have been the king of the ancient kingdom. And as Vegapunk himself theorized, the Great Kingdom had technology that surpassed even the science of modern day. Not to mention, there was an undying flame, a source of energy that could power everything. The Great Kingdom was allegedly a utopia, on a level that our propagandized brains cannot even imagine. It was so powerful that the world government is still insecure about it even after 800 years. 100 years! But this triggers an interesting question. If the Great Kingdom was so powerful, and if Joyboy was the king, then how the hell did someone so strong lose? We know that Oda takes a lot of inspiration from real-life history and popular mythologies, and if there is one thing we know from history, it's that this world has seen empires rise and fall. Will Durant once said, "A nation is born stoic and dies Epicurean." Yes, the 20 kingdoms including Alabasta were against the Great Kingdom. There was a major Cold War, or perhaps an actual war, but ultimately, the Great Kingdom wasn't something that could be taken down by a few small kingdoms. No, it must have been betrayals and broken promises that led to the downfall of the Great Kingdom. Now, Zunisha committed a crime and was sentenced to walk the seas. He has been walking for over 800 years. There is no way the world government could have come up with such a creative punishment. Yes, it was definitely Joyboy himself who ordered Zunisha to do this. The Iron Giant probably messed up twice, 800 years ago and then 200 years ago. It is apologizing because it also failed Joyboy. There is the promise to the Mermaid Princess as well as the other residents of Fishman Island, but this promise was broken by Joyboy for unknown reasons. Nefertari D. Lily was the leader of one of the nations that was aligned against the Great Kingdom. However, she turned on them, and she is also the one who led to the poneglyphs being spread all across the world. She was the one who tipped the Kazuki family on creating the poneglyphs. In chapter 1085, Imu wonders if this was a genuine mistake on Lily's part, or was it part of a greater plan. After all, even though the Allies managed to create the world government, Imu still fears the ideology of the Great Kingdom so much that even now, he continues to erase anyone or anything that tries to learn the truth. Of course, it's not possible to speculate exactly what Oda has been cooking up. We're about a narrative that has been decades into the making. However, considering the way stories work in One Piece, as well as the idea of inherited will, we can reasonably assume that what the OG Joyboy experienced 800 years ago may have been a compromise on his dream rather than a total defeat. Yes, some of the members of Joyboy's crew made mistakes, but the systematic plan to spread the poneglyphs can mean that even if there was an unexpected betrayal, Joyboy was able to plan ahead together with Lily. To make sure that the truth about the greatest civilization of the One Piece world isn't lost, they created the poneglyphs and spread the message across the world. Still, that doesn't answer why or how the Great Kingdom lost. This is where I'm going to present another idea. What if the Great Kingdom didn't lose as much as it failed? Like, what if Joyboy started some grand global event? An ideology so overwhelming that it resulted in pushback from the other kingdoms. Think about it this way. The Great Kingdom wasn't attacked unprovoked. Joyboy most likely had the same dream as Luffy and Roger. We don't know their dream, but what we do know is that it's both childish and idealistic. From what we have seen of Luffy and Roger, and considering how Luffy said in chapter 1049 that he wants a world where his friends can eat as much as they want, we can assume that regardless of how the dream is phrased, it is about true equality for all. In the Void Century, Joyboy pursued the same dream, but because achieving such a dream would have resulted in the dissolution of the other nations too, they naturally rebelled against the Great Kingdom. In the end, Joyboy's goal was too much of an ideal. He failed, but in order to keep his dream alive, he and Lily came up with the poneglyphs. Joyboy told Zunisha to walk the seas so that he can help in fulfilling his dream. The Iron Giant must have been given a similar order. You see, it doesn't matter how deep the lore becomes or how complex the plot gets. One Piece, at its core, is a story about inherited will, destiny of age, and the dreams of the people. Joyboy sought to create a free world where everyone is equal. Such a world was antithetical to the interests of 20 small kingdoms that later founded the world government, and that's why they rebelled. Lily was an exception in the sense that she was able to understand Joyboy's POV, unlike the rest of them. Joyboy couldn't succeed in achieving his dream because the small kingdoms allied themselves against the Great Kingdom. Joyboy failed, but he knew that someday, someone with the same dream as him would appear and bring the world to its dawn. That's why Joyboy accepted his defeat and put his hopes into a future Joyboy. When you think about it, this is very similar to Roger's story. He failed to achieve his true dream because Shirahoshi wasn't born yet, and so he decided to pass it down to future generations. Now to sum it all up, I'd add that if Joyboy was betrayed, it was likely due to someone's incompetence and not out of malice. If Zunisha and the Iron Giant had actually betrayed Joyboy, they wouldn't be sulking like they are now. They just made a mistake. As for what they did, we don't know, but the mistakes were instrumental enough to lead to the downfall of the Great Kingdom. That's why they still can't get over it, even though it's been so many centuries. Ultimately, the destiny of age is the dawn of the world. And Luffy will bring this dawn, not as a favor to Joyboy, but as his own dream. What do you think? Come on guys, let's continue the conversation in the comment section down below. Press like if you enjoyed the video, and do let me know what you think of videos like this one, because this is our first theory video on the channel. Let me know if you'd like more such content in the future. Well then, I guess I'll see you all in the next video.